Howdy. Let's talk about the time Twitch beat Sans, and why it is simultaneously an impressive achievement of online coordination and also not really a legitimate win, despite the insane effort that was required to pull it off. Our tale begins almost a year ago, when I was trying to figure out how to use this very simple program, known as Python Twitch Plays, to allow my chat to play Undertale by typing simple commands into chat to be translated into button presses on my keyboard. Now, I don't know how to code, especially not in Python. But Henry Fundenberger's program is designed to be highly accessible, even to complete non-coding loaf brains like myself. And so, before long, I had some very basic commands that allowed for simple movement and other very basic button presses, despite my lack of knowledge. But being a Twitch Plays Pokemon veteran, I wasn't satisfied with such a simple interface. And so, several thousand lines of horribly misguided copy-pasta later, I had twisted the source code, not merely into spaghetti code, but into a Cthulian nightmare monster that would drive all who beheld it into madness. Despite its incomprehensible nature, I had bug-tested it to perfection, at least as much as you can, with only one playtester. But before I could risk exposing my fans to this beast, I needed a smaller scale test to make sure it was ready for the big wide world. So, I very carefully stitched together the unused rooms of Undertale into a sort of Undertale obstacle course designed to test the limits of the hardware, software, and audience's patience. And they beat the whole thing in a single day. Gosh darn it. If I really wanted to test this thing, we were going to need something my audience couldn't beat in a single day. We needed Sans. Despite my Cthulian creation, I still don't really know how to code, so most of that night was spent using my limited understanding of mod tools to block off all the escape routes from Sans's Judgment Hall, so my audience couldn't just reset and play the whole game while I was asleep. I made an announcement, went to bed, and awoke to complaining. Not complaining that Sans's attacks were too hard to dodge, but complaining that it was impossible to hit the Z button fast enough to deal damage. This taught me a lot about how key presses work, something other coders would help expand upon later, during the real run. But by the time I awoke and patched the issue, people were already starting to lose hope and wander off. I knew that in order to have high enough volumes of play testers to actually give me the sort of useful data I needed, I would need to make some slight tweaks to the setup. I needed the fight to be fair and possible enough that it would feel like people have a shot at success, even though I know deep within my heart that they do not. And so, I decided to buff the Tem Armor. I wouldn't change much, I decided. Just the healing. 1 HP every few turns was basically useless, and one of the biggest challenges for a Twitch Plays chat is navigating the menu to reach the healing items, so I figured if the Tem Armor gave a full heal each round, it would sort of balance out, so the chat could focus on the real challenges of this fight, namely dodging the attacks and coordinating their movements. Unfortunately, it took me a very long time to figure out how the Tem Armor's code even heals the player in battle. And so, by the time I finally found the lines responsible, I was in no shape to read them, let alone edit them. But I didn't want to lose another day of play testing to something so trivial. And so, I committed what is probably the greatest sin of my entire code editing lifetime. Let me try to explain. The lines responsible for the Tem Armor heal are right here in the battle controller script. The first if statement checks if the player is wearing either the apron or the Tem Armor. The second, I'm not really sure about, but it seems to check something about the nature of which fight you're in. And the third checks what turn you're on and triggers it to heal the player by 1 HP every other turn, presuming their HP is below the maximum. Since the maximum HP of Frisk on a Geno run was 92, I figured I could just swap 1 HP for 91 HP, and then the player would heal to full at the start of each turn. Now, if this script were utilizing the same HP recovery script as the heal items, that would be fine. But since this is its own script, and was only ever meant to heal the player by 1 HP, Toby didn't program any sort of check to prevent it from healing above the maximum. And so, just like the in and snowed in, this change I made to the script can cause the player's HP to go, well beyond their max HP, to the point of basically doubling it. But, at the time, I decided that was basically fine, since many of the attacks can still kill you pretty easily if you fail to dodge them, even with the buff. So, I figured this wasn't too bad. The real problem was the frequency. I don't really understand how this statement works, and the sun was rising, and so I committed the greatest sin a coder can. I just grabbed some random code from later down in the script, blindly pasted it in, and prayed it would work. And I was too tired for this, so I just disabled the sound effect and released it into the world before crashing. When I awoke, I discovered that the lines I had randomly pasted into this check appear to be related to the fight menu. So, anytime the player interacts with this menu, it runs the check to see if the player's HP is below max and then heals them by 91 if they are. Which is fine, I thought to myself. After all, you only take damage when the menu is gone, and then it will run once when the menu comes back up, and stop when the player has 92 or more HP. It's not like anyone deals damage while the player is on the menu, I said to myself, so I doubt anyone will even notice. Oh, right. I forgot, we're dealing with Sans, aren't we? I asked the chat if I should fix this, but the overwhelming response was no, because even with this Overheal exploit, they still couldn't beat Sans, even after hours and hours of trying, and I was getting all the delicious data that I needed. So, I let them have it. And that is where my coding sins ended and Toby's began. After a full week of obsessive testing and tweaking, some of the more dedicated players started to find little bugs with the mechanics of this fight that they could utilize, namely his blue attacks, which could be reliably dodged by just pressing and holding all 4 directional buttons simultaneously. But the real stinger was the final attack, as even with the Overheal glitch and the blue attack cheese, there seemed to be no way to outlast the relentless onslaught of damage this one dealt. Although, as they tried, they did find that, very, very rarely, they could slip past this part of the attack completely unharmed through the use of some kind of glitch that was said to require very precise timing. I reviewed the footage of all of our closest attempts and found that this glitch seemed to be at the heart of our success. But though this glitch has been documented by both Ocean Bagel and Shay, I somehow utterly failed to find anything about it, and so I went on the quest to recreate it. Lining up footage, comparing frames, and finally after discussing it with actual coders such as Walkable Crane, we figured it out. What's happening here is that the bones along this hallway are all spaced very precisely, so that after Sans slams you into this wall, the soul should always be horizontally aligned with them, and thus do damage on contact, no matter what keys you press as you are falling. But, if you jump as you hit the wall, this can shift your alignment ever so slightly, so that none of the bones can touch you. Because the blue attacks will cause the player to jump as long as they are holding down the correct directional button, even if they are also holding down the wrong directional buttons. This means we can use this to cheese the first blue attack, the hallway, and the third blue attack, leaving only the Gaster Blasters and the normal bone attacks. Even so, getting an entire chat to coordinate on this is nigh impossible, since chat members have to keep explaining their strategy to every new viewer so they can sit still on the menu just long enough to get that overheal. And then, coordinate 4 diagonal presses to get that misalignment for the hallway before getting those final diagonal jumps and then just hunkering down in the corner to pray. But, finally, after a solid week of struggling, they did it. I know some of you pro gamers out there might say this isn't a real victory, because after all, we had to hack the Tem Armor and then glitch abuse like crazy. But for me, this was just an exercise to test the console that happened to have the fascinating side effect of showing me glitches and mechanics of this fight that I never thought were possible. And it later led to the Twitch chat beating Undertale, all on their own, 100% free of any cheats, hacks, skips, or other keyboard side intervention. And they did it in under a week. So, maybe Mystic Slime didn't have to go easy on you after all. But that has me wondering, If everyone knew the strategies in advance, and we didn't have to fiddle around with the menu, could we beat Sans without the overheal? Only one way to find out. Twitch stream should be up this Sunday at 1 p.m. Eastern if you want to try it out. Until then,
don't forget to like and subscribe for more Hyperlink Blocked.